Money may not be able to buy happiness, but if you're the richest man in the world, it can buy free speech, or at least that's what Elon Musk is promising in his purchase of Twitter. Quote, free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy, and Twitter is the digital town square where matters vital to the future of humanity are debated. Musk, who of course is already the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, says he plans to take the platform private after the $44 billion deal is finalized and wants to make it better than ever by enhancing the product with new features, making the algorithms open source to increase trust, defeating the spam bots, and authenticating all humans. So what exactly does that mean for the future of Twitter, for Musk, for Trump, for all the rest of us? I'm joined by Dan Primack, business editor at Axios, and the Washington Post social media reporter, Naomi Nix. Naomi and Dan, great to see you both. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
You know, Naomi, for me, and I think a lot of people, the ultimate question is, why does he want this company? You write that he expresses concern about aggressive content moderation, threatening free speech. When was free speech ever a $44 billion issue for Elon Musk?
It's a good point, because Twitter is actually not the most financially in the best financial shape when it compares to other social media companies like Snapchat and TikTok. It's had, user growth that hasn't met expectations and revenue growth that's disappointed investors. And so, what Musk said is he's really interested in preserving a sort of open digital square, particularly for a platform that has such consequences in democracies and in politics. And, he saw that being in danger, like other sort of Republicans have voiced similar concerns as well.
But Dan, just staying on this for a minute. I mean, he spoke, I guess, to this today. He tweeted, the extreme antibody reaction from those who fear free speech says it all. I have no idea what that means. But what I do know is, getting back to his history, speak to employees at Tesla. They don't see him as a free speech kind of guy with these non-disparagement clauses. Somebody on Twitter was tracking his private flights with a bot. He tried to shut that down. I mean, where's the free speech history with this guy?
Well, a couple things about that. One, I would say there's probably a difference. I think we can agree that there is a difference between what somebody might think should be allowed on a social media platform that's available to everybody and what's allowed within a singular company, whether or not you agree with what Musk did inside that company. So I think that would be the dichotomy he would probably make on that. Look, Musk is part of a fairly large contingent of people, particularly in Silicon Valley, more libertarian than Republican, who feel that Twitter has been very heavy-handed with its block button, particularly over the last year and a half. And, as for the $44 billion, it's $44 billion because this is the only game in town, right? This is like if you want to buy the Boston Red Sox, you pay what the Boston Red Sox cost, because there's not another baseball team in Boston you can buy. There is only one Twitter. So if you want it, you're going to pay for it. Yeah, again, I'm still not clear why he wants it. Can you, Naomi, what does less content moderation mean to you? I know he hasn't filled in the blanks, but what's your diagnosis of what he's talking about?
Look, this debate about where do you draw the line between sort of policing misinformation or hate speech and letting particularly newsmakers, politicians, high-profile figures or activists be able to voice their opinion is a tricky one that both Facebook and Twitter have been navigating and have drawn criticism over. I think the big million-dollar question facing Elon and facing Twitter right now in this moment is, do you reverse the permanent ban on President Donald Trump and let him back on the platform?
What's your answer to that question? What's your answer, Naomi?
I'm not going to say my answer, but I think the question is, Twitter took the unusual move of deplatforming a president after, for his role in encouraging the riots at the Capitol. And, they drew a lot of criticism for that. And so the question is, now that Elon has reins of the company, will he decide to make a different decision?
Dan, let's stay on Trump for a minute. Glorification of violence policy was what the people atop Twitter said that Trump violated. Here's what he said yesterday to Fox News. I'm not going on Twitter. I'm going to stay on Truth. Truth Social, his thing. I hope Elon buys Twitter because he'll make improvements to it. He's a good man, but I'm going to be staying on Truth. he will begin truthing. I can't believe I'm even saying this, over the next week. We all know what's going to happen. In a month, he's going to say, well, I wasn't going to go on Twitter, but millions of people came up to me and said, sir, you have to be on Twitter, so you're going to be on Twitter. But is this part of the end game? I mean, this is as high profile as it gets. Is Musk made up his mind and he's just not sharing this with us?
I mean, we don't know. And to be honest, there's a lot. Remember, this is a deal that came together in 11 days. And leave aside that this is Twitter or Trump, any major merger and acquisition takes way longer than that, which is why when the press release came out yesterday, even on the financial stuff, it's really, really bare bones. And when there was an all-hands employee meeting at Twitter yesterday, and employees had questions about content moderation, they had questions about their own jobs, the answer was, ask Elon when he gets here. I think if they'd asked what's going to be in the cafeteria tomorrow, they would have said, ask Elon when he gets here. They really don't know. He hasn't said, and one last thing, Elon did a live interview at the TED conference in Vancouver a couple of weeks ago. He got pushed on some of the content moderation questions. And honestly, I don't think he has completely thought them through. And for better or for worse, when you get behind the desk at Twitter, it's a little bit different than when you're kind of chirping at it from the outside.
But when you get behind the desk, Dan Primack, and the desk is in a private company, you can do whatever the hell you want, can you not? If he chooses to say, I don't want any independent candidates on my site, or I don't want any pro-climate change action on my site, no one can stop him from doing it, can they?
Well, no one could, although that last part would be antithetical to Musk. But no, I mean, no one can. But then again, as a publicly traded company, that would have been true too. Who was able to stop them from banning Trump if you disagree, right? Like, I don't think the public-private changes. What really changes is there's fewer checks and balances, right? Jack Dorsey was actually basically kicked out by the board. A new CEO was put in. That CEO could have been kicked out. Elon now owns it. He gets to put in whoever he wants, come hell or high water.
You know, Naomi, leaving Trump out for a minute, because obviously that depends on where you stand, whether you want him to stand again on Twitter. In fairness, what's the public good that may come of this for the average Twitter consumer?
I think that remains to be seen. So I think one area we should be watching is, how does Elon decide to change the product itself? Does he implement an edit button? Does he sort of increase the subscription service and sort of cater to a more elite audience? Or does he change the underlying advertising business model? Those sorts of changes would affect the average user on Twitter. And then, you know, there's questions around, like, does he, change the rules for content and political content in particular, in a time when we're coming up on midterm elections, when there are hundreds of lawmakers and seats up for grabs, and how he chooses to determine who gets to stay and who gets to be on the platform, has real world implications for our electoral system.
One last thing for both of you before you go. If we can step back and put this in some context. Sheldon Whitehouse, Senator Whitehouse, has been on the show talking about his favorite topic, hundreds of millions of dollars of dark money buying seats on the Supreme Court, according to him. Jeff Bezos buys one of the finest papers in America, Washington Post. Most people see him as a benevolent owner. Of course, he's only the second richest man in the world. And then this. Dan, first, will this thing, the ability of an individual to buy something that has an effect on all of us, cause anybody in power in Congress, for example, to re-examine issues of wealth inequity in this country? Or is this just water over the bridge?
I mean, even if you had, the kind of the furthest, the Elizabeth Warren billionaire tax, Elon Musk could still afford to buy Twitter. I would say, Jim, if you think about it, there's a little back to the future here, right? I mean, if you go older than we are, most of the major newspapers in the U.S. were owned by the richest businessmen in the U.S. In fact, they were often created by those people to kind of do their political bidding. I don't think this is, so I'm not sure this is a new phenomenon. I just think we're kind of getting back to an old one.
How about you, Naomi?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so sure the issue is, does a billionaire own a tech company like Twitter? But which billionaire, and what does he believe in? And what values does he uphold that should underline the company's positions and policies and products?
Dan and Naomi, thank you so much. And Dan, just to correct you, if I may, for a second, I was here when the first newspaper was actually created. But thank you for your kind words.
Hanging out together?
I was, indeed. Dan Primack, Naomi Nix, I really appreciate your thoughts and your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.